And it's 4 o'clock in Los Angeles. It's 6 o'clock in Chicago. It's 7:30 a.m. in Auckland, New Zealand. And it's 7 p.m. in New York City. Hello, everybody. Mad Dog Scipio. Joined as I am each and every week by the pain in the ass herself. the Pitbull herself. Amelia Pitbull Chapman. How you doing, Amelia?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. You can see it's just you and me here tonight.
Right.
But we're waiting on the Rowdy Rev. I'm also waiting on.
I wonder if he had to get rowdy.
honor.
That's why he's late.
Oh, here's the Rowdy Rev. Here he is. There you go. Here, speaking of Rowdy Rev, here he is. About to take his place in the studio. How are you, Rev?
Hello.
Oh man, I tell you what, we got a great show tonight if our guest of honor shows up.
All right.
We're going to have a hell of a show tonight. Well, supposed to be playing a great show tonight, but Joe Cohn from Fire is not here. Here he is, Alan.
Hello.
Alan Taylor is here. Do me a favor, Alan.
Yeah.
Put your name, Alan Taylor, where it says a guy.
A guy. Oh my goodness. Let me see.
I'll do it for you. Hold on.
I got it.
Okay. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
A guy.
I got it right here. I got Alan Taylor right here. Hold on. I'm faster than you.
Yeah, that's probably true.
It's done. So I got it.
All right, you got it.
I told you I'm faster than you, schmuck.
Well, you know me.
Nice.
I'm from Missouri. It's a show me state. So
Well, I showed you that I'm faster than you.
cheers.
Let me introduce you, everybody.
Cheers.
Alan, this is Amelia Chapman, the Pitbull.
Hi.
This is Rowdy Reverend Steve Kwiatkowski. You
Excellent.
already know me. This is Alan Taylor.
I'm
He's probably
sorry.
the smartest guy I know. Well,
Don't give me that much credit, man.
Myself. Alan's seriously, he's a scholar. He's an academist. What is your credentials, actually, Alan? You rattled me off to me. What is that? Like an expert in Scientology? What was that?
No. I have a bachelor's in science of history, and I got that through Central Methodist University.
There you go. Beautiful. Terrific.
Excellent school. If you guys are shopping around,
smarts behind you.
I just had the time. That's all.
Right.
Yeah. Well, tonight, while we're waiting for our guest of honor, Joe Cohn, to join, and Joe is the legislative and policy director of FIRE. That's the organization called the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. Tonight's show, it's a hot button issue.
Yeah.
What is protected speech and is hate speech, quote unquote, hate speech protected? And what is hate speech? And I want Joe is when he gets here, if he gets here, is going to tell us what all of that is and what that means. And I have a little bit of backup here just in case Joe doesn't show up, but I'm sure he will. Alan, I'm going to you since you're like the new kid on the block. Well, new kid, long time coming. You work in the educational system.
I do.
Under fire here lately for its suppression of free speech on campuses. Everything from the grade school level to college and university. Are you feeling that where you are?
No. My school is a very small school. Excuse me. They fly under the radar, which is kind of good. Everybody knows everybody. There's great buy-in by the community. So I don't feel like we have the same sort of hostility pointed towards us because the community believes in us. So we've been very protected by that sense.
That's an interesting wording there. The community believes in us. Yeah. I have never heard that from an academist. The community believes in us. Most colleges, even high school for that matter, particularly in this area, the community is at odds with almost everything that grammar school and high schools are doing. College is a whole nother level of bullshit. It's
Yeah.
crazy. We're seeing it here.
It's sickening.
We have one of the largest colleges in South Jersey, 5 minutes from where we are right now.
Yep.
And it's a veritable prison camp. It is.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
veritable prison camp for free speech. I mean, to the point where they have a panel of 12 people, and I don't know why they picked 12 because it's an even number. They have a panel of 12 people who decide who can perform, who can speak there, who they can bring in. They have, it's like almost like a McCarthyistic list of who's allowed.
Yeah.
You know? You haven't felt that in your area, fortunately. Flying under the radar for you is a very good thing, trust me.
Well, I mean, it's give and take. If you don't mind.
No, not at all, please.
On the one hand, you have, like you said, especially in universities, there's been hostility towards perhaps conservative commentators, people who might offer a more pro-white right-wing perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then in K through 12, you almost see the opposite side of it, where there's been this sort of concerted effort to try to limit things that might be considered more liberal on the left side.
Yeah.
And so in both sense, there's an authoritarian streak running through our politics right now, where in either case, book banning or censorship is sort of the de facto answer to these questions. And of course, this is the problem. Free speech, the Constitution makes it abundantly clear, the only way to go against bad speech is more speech, not getting rid of it.
And thank you for validating the United States Supreme Court, because I have their ruling. And I mean, literally, this is literally their ruling. Pastor Steve.
Yes, sir.
Alan brings up a very interesting point. I saw you shaking your head in agreement to his commentary. Just from your standpoint, from the pulpit, what are you having to endure by way of free speech and or maintaining the balance between the state and your vocation?
Well,
I'll use that word.
Well, the best thing about our church is that you do not have to have a church that's a 501c3. 501c3 is an option for a church.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a 501c3 on your church, they can tell you what you can and can't preach. And
interesting.
That's so, when people get a 501c3, that's because they want to sell things and,
right.
Get the government approval. But because of the separation of church and state, we're blessed. I can say anything I want from that pulpit. They're still going to try. I mean, because they've tried with me already. For instance, the other day, I'm going to tell you, and I could have gotten this person on.
I want you to speak right into that mic, Pastor.
So the other day, I was ministering to somebody. It started off, I was joking with them. They're trying to become transgender.
Oh, for God's sake.
And he was, I'm going to say he, because that's the proper gender you're born with. You can't change it, whether you think so or not. God says otherwise. So I said, well, I guess you're mad. You might as well tell Biden and Harris how upset you are, making a joke, right? Then he starts getting into it and starts cussing me out, saying I'm transphobic and I'm hateful and blah, 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 blah. I said, okay. So I said, this person's
been there,
hurting.
done that one.
This person's hurting. So I started ministering to him. And he literally went around on Facebook posting my pictures saying that I'm hateful, that the church is it's not welcoming, and then tried to give me a bad name. But let me tell you something. I have friends in all places, and one of my friends, whose name is Joey, actually messaged me and said, Pastor, this moron is speaking all kind of lies about you. And I said, Joey, here's the conversation we actually had. These people are insane on the left. They're just completely insane. They're far gone. And a lot of this that's going on is because the government is using them. What's the word that I was using? They're exploiting these type of people for their own agenda.
Yeah.
If you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Joe Cohn is here.
So the government will try to they could try to bring me up on charges, but I always back up what I say with scripture. It's never what I say. I use the word of God because scripture's clear. That way, let God do the judgment.
Right. Okay. It's Joe is here.
Hello.
Hey, how are you, Joe?
I'm doing
I can
well,
hear
and
you,
I'm
but I
so-
cannot see you.
And I'm so sorry that I am, running late. I'm sorry that I have to appear in this form. But thank you
That's
for
quite
having
all
me.
right. You just take your time, and when you get where you can join us, pop right in here. But we'll keep you on here as long as we can.
Sounds good. I'm sorry that I got held up.
We're asking the question tonight: what is protected speech, and is hate speech protected?
Well, most hateful speech is protected. There isn't a categorical exception to the First Amendment for hate speech. And the court has over and over and over again said that there isn't. But there are other exceptions that sometimes apply. You can't engage in discriminatory harassment that has a very specific definition and a very, high threshold. You can't engage in true threats, non-hyperbolic threats, that with the intent of making someone believe that they're in actual, real physical, danger. So there are some examples of speech that could be hateful that would lose their protection, but speech doesn't lose its protection as quote unquote hate speech. It's not a category.
It's interesting. I have the Supreme Court ruling in front of me, Joe. And it says while hate speech is not a legal term in the United States, the U.S. Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that most of what would qualify as, quote, hate speech, unquote, in other Western countries is legally protected speech under the First Amendment. In a Supreme Court case, Matal versus Tam, the justices unanimously reaffirmed that there is effectively no hate speech exception to the free speech rights protected by the First Amendment. Thereby, the U.S. government may not discriminate against speech on the basis of the speaker's viewpoint. Is that what you just said?
Yep, pretty much, more eloquently than I could state it, when you're quoting the Supreme Court. But Matal v. Tam was a case where a band that called itself the Slants was denied the ability to trademark their name because the trademark office said that the word slants was derogatory, towards Asians.
Yeah.
And, they filed suit and the Supreme Court, ruled in favor of the band. And the band, very luckily, for me, was a guest in Fire's offices in our headquarters and came and gave us a little private, concert in celebration of their victory. It was really wonderful.
Yeah. I brought this show on tonight. In fact, it's very appropriate that we brought this show on. How about it, Amelia?
Yes.
We were Amelia and I. By the way, Joe, Amelia Chapman is here. She's my social media guru. I'm here with Pastor Stephen Kwiatkowski. I'm also here with academist Alan Taylor, and of course, you know and love me. But here is what happened, Joe. We were deplatformed on YouTube for engaging what they said was hate speech. Now, what I said was, and I didn't use a derogatory term, I referred to a particular group of hierarchy as Zionist pigs. I never mentioned anything about people's nationality.
No.
By the way, I happen to love the Jewish people, and Jews are not Zionists. It's a particular type of Zionist like calling a Catholic priest a Jesuit. There are, the Jesuits are like the hit squad of the Vatican,
Mm-hmm.
So understand that. If I say, Joe, I love you, you goofy Jew bastard, you would probably just fluff it off. But if I said the same thing on YouTube, I'd be deplatformed. Despite the fact, Joe, that there's a KKK group on YouTube right now saying we hate Jews, we hate niggers, we hate spics, we hate this, we hate that. And it's out there and it's on there, and the web channel is called White Power. YouTube.com/@white power. Now, how do they justify that?
Well, let's start by just saying that if YouTube were a government actor, there'd be no doubt that what they had engaged in is viewpoint-based, discrimination that's unlawful under the First Amendment. But
Yeah.
they're a private actor, so the court's going to have to analyze, first and foremost, whether or not they can be held to that same standard, or whether they have the same First Amendment right that other private actors decide what speech they want to associate with and what not, the way you can on your show decide to exclude people whose views you don't want to host. So it's going to be a bit of a different analysis.
Well, here's the interesting thing about that commentary. I welcome people of opposing viewpoints. I love the debate. Look, we can all learn something from opposing viewpoints. That's the whole purpose of that's why I started this show. I want to know who's out there. What are they thinking? What's going on?
Yeah, and on a normative basis, I would hope that YouTube would value being a platform for the full range of opinions, that are out there. But it's going to be a different kind of analysis for the courts when trying to figure out whether to apply the First Amendment, and they might not.
Yeah, it's a quagmire, Pastor. What Joe just said rings for you, doesn't it?
Sure it does. Because I can give a sermon. Oh, sorry. For instance, I actually have one of my videos flagged on Facebook. And I mean, the Bible clearly states the word Jew. Now, the liberals are taking it to an extent, like if, for instance, they said, "Hail, King of the Jews," during when they were ordering Jesus' crucifixion. Do you know, even if that's heard or whatever it is, I don't know how they can just using the word Jew anymore. And if that's what you're born, not even in a derogatory way, but now it's a bad thing to even say the word, and you're born Jewish.
Wow.
That's my point.
And you can literally say it correctly, right out of the Bible, and they will, for some reason,
quoting the Bible is hate speech, Joe, is what he's getting at.
It is.
You see where we are with this, Joe?
But if you were a Jewish group, and if you said the word Jew, then you could get away with it.
Right, but if you're reading the Bible, even if they pick up on that word, it's like, oh, you're anti-Semitic. How? Jesus was a Jew.
Yeah.
How?
I'll tell you what. I want everybody to kind of to watch this, and let's just watch.
Can we do a station identification before we watch that?
Absolutely, we can. WWTF Radio, in conjunction with Wrestling with the Future, is on the record tonight. We're heard on Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Pandora, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, Facebook, Odyssey, Truth Social, Pinterest, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and hundreds more. Again, WWTF Radio is on the record. Amelia, thank you.
You're welcome.
Pastor, continue where you were.
So, you could say stuff like, okay, is it just the four of us, or is he still there?
He's coming back.
Okay. So you can literally be preaching the Bible. You could say something like, I could be preaching against the whole woke ideology that's grooming our children, for instance. And if you say something in regard to that, even quoting the scripture about the effeminate, that man has no business being that about the effeminate not entering the kingdom of heaven. And that's what the Bible says. It's not what I say.
Right.
And I welcome LGBT people into our church. We actually have a few.
Yep.
But I mean, I don't just take certain parts of the scripture out because, I'm the one that goes out. So whatever the word says, we're going to say, well, that's anti-Semitic. You're transphobic, which is a new word, by the way.
Yeah. What the fuck does that even mean, transphobic? I mean, what the fuck is that?
Or you're a racist. That they love to throw that one in there.
That's me. I'm all of it. I'm transphobic. I'm anti-Semitic. I'm racist.
All of it.
I hate puppies and little children. That's me.
Right, but if you start preaching against sin and against the evils in the world, it's like, well, you're targeting that person because they're black, or you're targeting that person because they're Jewish, or you're targeting that person because they're transgender. Hey, guess what? I don't care what you do.
Yeah.
What I care about is if your soul's right with God or not. The end.
There you go. Let's listen to this. The next two videos are about 4 minutes long. This is 4 minutes that you want invested. Watch this.
It's the opposite of liberalism. I can mention many examples where it's including free speech.
Free speech used to be a left or liberal value, and yet we see from the in quotes left a desire to actually censor. I think we should be extremely concerned about anything that undermines the First Amendment. There's a reason for the First Amendment. People came from countries where they could not speak freely and where saying certain things would get you thrown into prison. And they were like, well, we don't want that here. And by the way, in many parts of the world, including parts of the world that people might think are relatively similar to the United States, the speech laws are draconian.
England is quite different.
I won't name any countries, but...
in France, I think if you deny the Holocaust, which I think is abhorrent, but I also think it should be part of free speech.
I really can't emphasize this enough. We must protect free speech. And free speech only matters, it's only relevant when it's someone you don't like saying something you don't like. The thing about censorship is that for those who would advocate it, just remember, at some point, that will be turned on you.
He wants to erode the very fabric of civilization, and Soros hates humanity.
That's my opinion.
Why share it? Especially, why share it when people who buy Teslas may not agree with you? Advertisers on Twitter may not agree with you.
This is freedom of speech. I'm allowed to say what I want.
You absolutely are, but I'm trying to understand. It puts you in the middle of a partisan divide in the country. It makes you a lightning rod for criticism. I mean, do you like that?
I love this.
I'm reminded of the scene in The Princess Bride, where he confronts the person who killed his father, and he says, offer me money, offer me power. I don't care.
So you just don't care?
I'll say what I want to say, and if the consequence of that is losing money, so be it.
I love that man. I love him. That's Elon Musk, and he don't give a flying fuck about losing money because he's got billions and billions of it. What does he care? But he stands for a bigger issue, which is he wants to be able to say what he wants to say. And he has that right. Alan Taylor.
Yes.
Commentary.
Well, in this sense, I think one thing that we need to deconstruct here, and our Mr. Cohn had alluded to it earlier. The public square is now ran by private entities, and so a lot of the protections that we presumed and had for since the beginning of our country are now co-opted by private organizations, private enterprises, and that's the barrier. That's the wall that allows for the censorship. That's the wall that allows for unelected not even bureaucrats, but unelected persons to be able to dictate what flies and what doesn't fly in our dialogue. Like the fact that all five of us can speak and be from very different parts of the globe right now is a technological miracle, and yet we rely on a corporation for that.
more importantly, Alan, and thank you for saying that, but much more importantly, we can have a dialogue and agree to disagree without killing each other.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's what's missing. People are, if I say to you, Alan, I hate you because you support Joe Biden.
I don't,
Based
but
on,
okay. don't mischaracterize me, please.
I like him already.
you're a Trump guy?
No, I like Cornel West. I'm for Cornel West.
Well, as long as you don't like Biden, he's
Well,
good.
let me just say, because we have to, in the interest of full disclosure, this podcast is brought to you by Biden Fetterman 2024. It's a no-brainer. Sleepy Joe and Dopey John.
Uncle Festerman.
Valhalla
Yeah.
Java.
There you go. No, I'll tell you what. I love the fact that you're not afraid to be an alternate.
Yeah, well, I would rather vote for what I believe in than vote out of fear of somebody else. That's just, I refuse to live by that.
I was labeled when I was 18 years old. I'm not even making this up. When I was 18 years old and I registered to vote for the first time, I was labeled a communist. Yeah.
I have a hard time believing that.
Because I chose to vote for Lyndon LaRue.
Lyndon LaRue.
Wow.
You remember him?
I don't. I need a study.
Yep. Lyndon. Here's Joe. Hey, Joe.
Sorry about the technical difficulties, everyone.
Oh,
that's okay.
brother,
That happened.
Let me give you the introduction that you so well deserve, because it's really important. This is he's a second time appearance. I will tell you, in the interest of full disclosure, Joe has been here before. He was my first favorite person in the world until I discovered Elon Musk. Now Joe's my second favorite person in the world. Let me tell you about Joe.
Possibly have discovered Musk second.
There you go. Right. Joe Cohn is the policy and legislative director of FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. He is the policy director overseeing that department's team of attorneys and staff, tasked with the duties of monitoring and engaging in legislation and regulatory matters under his leadership. FIRE has secured numerous victories for free speech and due process at the local, state, and federal level, and that's why I love Joe Cohn, and he will always be a welcome guest back on this show. Joe, the issue of the night is hate speech protected speech. Is it? I think the Supreme Court answered the question. Is it a term at all? It really is kind of made up for all intents and purposes. But how does that lexicon become part of the dialogue when it's not even a legal definition?
Well, I don't know how to break this to you, but most people don't take their cues from the Supreme Court when deciding how to talk.
What a shame!
But
What a fucking shame, Joe.
But I will say that the real issue is not whether or not people say things that are hateful.
Right.
One of the key reasons why most hate speech is protected is because it's so subjective to figure out what is hateful. One man's, lyric is another man's insult. All of that stuff is, has a large degree of truth to it.
Yeah.
But there's also just practical and important societal reasons why even the most obnoxious and hateful, frankly, speech deserves and warrants protection, and why it's helpful for it to be, in the atmosphere of speech. I mean, and that's not to say that it wouldn't be great to live in a utopia where people get along and no one has hateful views about each other. But in a world in which that's not the case, free speech is what allows people to put those views out there in the world so we know who the bigots are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Jewish guy. If there's, a Nazi in the room, I'd rather know it. than
None
not.
here, Joe.
None here.
No. By the way,
That's what I hear.
and you're talking to a guy that's been called anti-Semitic. And he's a pastor. I've been called anti-Semitic. I've been called a Jew hater. I've been called everything but white and human. I've been categorized. I was just telling the crew. I've been categorized as a communist, as a KKK sympathizer. I hate them motherfuckers. I lived in Tennessee for 15 years. Right
Well, that
next
was awfully
to
hateful stuff you just said about the KKK.
fuck them. I don't give a shit.
I know. I'm just
Fuck the KKK. You know, I don't give two shits about but I'll defend their right to say it. Because if I don't defend the right to say it, we can't have a dialogue. We can't have a dialogue if I don't defend at least if I don't defend the scumbag, if I don't have a dialogue with the scumbag, and everything is beautiful and rosy and utopian, at some point there's going to be a crack in the armor, and it's going to crack fucking big.
No, that's true. And I think, the other point, that I'd like to emphasize besides just knowing who the bigots are, is that when people are afraid to speak their mind for fear of some form of punishment, it doesn't change their views. It forces them to talk only to the people who they feel safe talking about those views with, the people who they think agree with them. And that solidifies and hardens those views, reinforces them. And what we need, if we're going to defeat bigotry out there in the world, and we live in a world where there is bigotry, whether through intent or whether it's through ignorance.
I'm sitting next to a guy, Joe, who deals with it every day.
I deal with it every day. All the time. It's gotten worse.
Steve's an Anglican priest. He's a priest.
But we need to be able to engage in dialogue with each other, and and some people might be wrong in the end in the analysis on some things. On a long enough timeline, I will eventually be wrong about something.
I doubt it, because you're right about pretty much fucking everything, Joe.
I love the confidence that it takes a long time to eventually become wrong about something, though. I very much love that.
Well, I hope
right?
I hope people are recognizing the humility there.
When you were coming on, we were just finishing up a clip by Elon Musk. I want you to take a look at this, and I want you and Amelia. By the way, Joe, this is Amelia Chapman. She's my social, but she does all our social stuff. Take a look at this, Joe. It's about a 3-minute clip, and you and Amelia have this dialogue. Just take a look at this.
Florida's lieutenant governor to get her perspective on this. Lieutenant Governor, thank you for being here. So many questions for you on this because this is new. This is different. You're the first state to try this. For a Florida resident, you've got a Florida resident who posts something on Twitter, on Facebook, and it's censored. What does this bill give them the right to do that they didn't have before?
Well, first of all, this bill is extremely important for Floridians, those of us that understand all too well the ills of communism, of tyranny, of oppression, who have fled other countries. We understand the importance of freedom of speech, and for Floridians, having Governor DeSantis sign the first of its kind in the nation is something that I think we're all extraordinarily proud of. Being able to ensure that these companies are held accountable, that these big tech oligarchs aren't simply changing the rules, their guidelines, their policies, as it favors their narrative. And so for Floridians, they need to be able to know what is the issue, what is the cause of why they are deplatforming or creating issues with censorship. They have to be open, transparent, and consistent, and they have to apply equally to both sides of the aisle. And so I think what we've seen for far too long is that these big tech companies, these oligarchs, are making unilateral decisions that only penalize, censor, and silence one voice, and that's the conservative voice.
Lieutenant Governor, the appeal of this law, I think, at an intuitive level is there's finally an avenue for accountability. People have felt like they just don't have a voice when they see what social media companies are doing. They say, but where can I go? What can I do? They have all the power. This law seems to give a little bit more power to the little guy. But you're getting a lot of critics, and actually on both sides of the aisle, saying this isn't going to stand up to constitutional scrutiny. What's your response to critics who are saying this just isn't going to pass muster with the courts?
Well, Governor DeSantis and I both feel strongly that this will pass muster, and if it needs to go all the way to the Supreme Court, then so be it. But we stand firm in our conviction that this is the right thing to do for Floridians. We're not trying to protect one class of individuals. We're not trying to protect Republicans or conservatives. We want it to be equal for everyone. We want to preserve free speech. Again, that's something that I think those of us whose parents hailed from places like Cuba, I think is very, very important for us to continue to push and make sure that all Floridians have the opportunity to understand what is it that they're being deplatformed for, and in particular political candidates. You can tune out those candidates that you don't particularly agree with, but for them to deplatform them while they're in the electoral process, I think is very, very inappropriate, and we're going to continue to fight for Floridians.
Okay. Two things that I gleaned from that. Number one, a pushback against conservatism, Joe. Number two, deplatforming people just because essentially there's no justification other than they may have a conservative viewpoint. Why the pushback? And I'm going to let Amelia tell her what her and I have had to deal with, more specifically what she's had to deal with. So let's get an answer to that clip.
So, the 11th Circuit, that's the Federal Court of Appeals, just below the Supreme Court, that governs over Florida and a few other states nearby, struck down that law as being unconstitutional under the rationale that social media platforms have their own free speech rights to associate with whom they want or don't want to. Now, the Fifth Circuit was evaluating a similar law, not identical, in Texas, and upheld its constitutionality. So there's now what we call a circuit split, teeing up the issue for the Supreme Court at some point to decide. And, I think they are going to accept a case to answer that question finally about whether or not the social media platforms' free speech rights have to prevail over claims of free speech violations by their users. And
Joe,
buyers of the belief that the social media platforms have that right.
Joe, can I interrupt you there with a question? Because I don't want to stop the train over here. But it's critically important that we get some clarification on this. By the very nature of the term, quote, social media, unquote, that evokes an air of inclusion, does it not? That evokes a kind of like a togetherness, does it not? I would concur. Would you concur with me?
I mean, I suppose I agree on that point, but I think that the important thing is that they also have some right to regulate who they want to associate with and what they want to platform, as well as private actors.
Okay,
it took centuries for individuals and governments to figure out how to live with and regulate the effects, whether good or bad, of the printing press.
Yeah,
which connected millions of people to conversations with each other, and social media, is relatively young, but doing the same thing. So, people aren't wrong that they're wielding a tremendous amount of power, but we need to be cautious about what it would mean to regulate, private entities and what they have to, host.
Well, it's pretty clear that institutions like Facebook, and I use institution very, very loosely, Facebook is hard pushing a very, very liberal agenda to the point where we're pulling off of Facebook.
Yes.
We've already been deplatformed from YouTube, and I had 3 channels there, Joe. We were deplatformed on one. I voluntarily took the other 2 down just so I don't have to deal with YouTube's bullshit. By the way, I have in front of me, Joe, the entire hate speech policy of YouTube. It is 1.5 pages, And there was no attorney drafting this. It was drafted by, and I quote, creators who shared their perspectives as well as expert organizations that study online bullying, unquote. That's a direct quote from the YouTube hate speech. Here's my question.
What is bullying?
Well, no, that's a whole nother, that's for another show, Pastor. That's for another show. My question is social media essentially a private platform or is it a public forum? I need a clear answer on this.
Fire's of the view that it's a private platform. And,
okay.
I
buy that.
And, and like I said, there's a circuit split. Federal courts have been divided with the two that have, decided the question, one, going one way and the other one, not quite calling it a public forum, but, saying that they can't engage in that kind of viewpoint-based discrimination. But ultimately, Fire, believes that cultural arguments for free expression on social media are what has to prevail, and that the government can't pass laws to make that happen. So, we would argue, for social media to contractually promise free speech in their terms and services, and to honor those practices, and would encourage people who have been censored beyond what the terms and services allow, to challenge those restrictions.
Alan Taylor, questions for Joe Cohn.
I suppose if I had a big question, it would be, how do you think the influence of John Roberts' Supreme Court, given that he tends to have a penchant for siding with corporate America, how do you think he's going to decide on this, considering that ostensibly the people who are leading this anti-censorship crusade are on the right, but they're going to be butting heads with the Roberts Court?
I hate to, read tea leaves of what any, individual justices are going to do, except the ones that have been really outspoken, on the issue. I don't know that it will be decided based on views of corporate America or corporatism or anything like that. I think there's going to be a very straightforward, kind of gut call for the justices about whether or not they truly are now the public square, or whether or not they're more like newspapers, that have editorial functions, have the ability to decide what they want to associate with, what they want to run, et cetera. And there's going to be a lot of lawyering that goes into it. A lot of smart people are going to advance a lot of, strong arguments on both sides. Ultimately, Fire was persuaded by the argument that, the cure might be worse than the disease with respect to giving the government the power to require private entities to allow people to associate in what needs to be able to be said, versus the right to have a diversity of platforms that could host different views. So that's ultimately where we came down. And, it's going to be the Super Bowl of free speech kind of question of our era. Because of what's at stake here, and I, wouldn't judge people for feeling otherwise, but that's how we feel.
A message from our friend Tom McDonough, and I am up against the hard break.
Yes.
Step 1, train the people only to consume. Step 2, infiltrate adults with the news. Step 3, indoctrinate the children through the schools and the music and the apps on the phones that they use. Step 4, separate the right from the left. Step 5, separate the white from the black. Step 6, separate the rich from the poor. Use religion and equality to separate them more. Step 7, fabricate a problem made a lie. Step 8, put it on the news every night. Step 9, when people start to fight and divide, take control. This is called situational design.
And we are back with Joe Cohn, Policy and Legislative Director of Fire. I love Fire. I love what they stand for. I love Sophia. She's my girl at Fire. I'll tell you what, she makes sure that your ass is here on time. I got news for you, bro.
Usually, but tonight can't be blamed on her.
Okay. I was going to say, if Sophia had her way, you would have been here at 6:45, brother. Okay, Amelia, I'm going to bring you up here, Amelia, because time for you and Joe to have a little chit chat.
Sure.
Tell Joe what you have to deal with on a daily basis, being my social media guru.
Well, it's making sure I put the correct words in when I do the promotions for the show. Make sure because if I use a certain word, it comes back at me and say, oh, you can't use that word, or you have to put in certain asterisks in there, be able to post it because it comes right back to me.
Here's my favorite thing, Amelia. Joe, you're going to love this. When they won't let her choose a word, she has to put ...
Yeah. ... on it.
You can't make this shit up. She's got to put ... Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, and if I use a certain particular word, it says, oh, you can't use that word. It has to be something certain to it. So I have to use like an adjective or a certain verb to that. It's very similar to that. So because I can't use a certain word that I'd like to use because it comes back, oh, that's a hate word, or that's not a correct certain word to that. And I'm like, okay, but that's what I don't mean it in a certain way, but it doesn't mean a certain bad way. And it comes back to me that way. So it's very, very hateful. And I'm like, well, I'm not trying to be that way. So, I mean, how I'm trying to say something like on tonight's show, 7 p.m. live, we're having hate speech or something like that. And they didn't like that word. But I'm like, how else am I trying to say it?
Here's the thing, Joe. I think what Amelia's getting at, and we've had this discussion privately as well. Here's the problem as we see it. There is this algorithm that controls the kind of how words are used and how they're chosen, and in what context they can be used.
Yeah.
Since when are we reliant upon an algorithm to express our emotion or our thoughts, or what do we do about this? Or is that just the way of the future? And should we all fucking kill ourselves?
It's a brave new world or a cowardly one, depending on your perspective.
It's a fucking cowardly one from the get-go, because I got news for you. In where I come from, in my world, men have balls, women have vaginas, men are men and women are women. Yeah. We're being run, the world is being run and policy directed by a bunch of sissy Mary trannies that don't know whether they're fucking boys or girls. Amen. Fuck them all up their collective asses. Right. I don't give a fuck who likes it, who hears it, who don't hear it. I don't give a shit. You know why? Because I have the right to say what I want to say. I own this motherfucking network, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Okay? That's what I had to do. I had to buy my own shit, okay? Just to be able to express my viewpoint. Here's my point, Joe. You obviously know I'm passionate about this. I get frustrated.
He's very passionate.
Yeah. Well, but I'm also a fierce, probably more so than Joe is. I am a fierce defender of free speech and of the Constitution in general, but particularly the first 5. Where do we go with this, my friend?
Well, I'll tell you that, to start with, if you were saying those things, in, a publicly operated public, forum, a traditional public forum, there's no doubt that it would be protected. So it's really going to turn on this question of, do the private entities have this right or not? And the Supreme Court is ultimately, hopefully, eventually going to take a case to decide that. And the fate of your, claim is going to turn on who they find more persuasive in this argument. And of course, there are powerful consequences on either side, such that it's unlikely to be a 9-0 opinion. It's unlikely to be a slam dunk. And there are legitimate reasons why people of all politics are divided on this question, because, there are important and weighty considerations on either side. And, ultimately, the 11th Circuit, in striking down the case in Florida, analogized it to, parade organizers, who aren't required to allow others with other messages on their own parade. So if you wanted to have a Italian pride parade, etc., you can't be required to allow floats that say something otherwise to attach to your message. And the question is, are they really just hosts, social media companies, or are they engaged in some type of editorial function because of how they behave, how they operate, and what they are, such that being required to keep different messages that they don't
Yeah.
want to post violates.
That's an
their rights as
interesting
trade
question.
organizations. So
That's a really interesting question.
So there isn't a clear and obvious answer that everyone is going to agree with in terms of how you do that math and which side you fall on, because there are strong free speech normative reasons why, either view would support free speech. It's a question of whose speech, the platform's ability to decide its own message, or the individual, folks. And the court's, teed up to answer that question at some point soon, I believe.
Yeah.
And Fire, agrees with the social media companies on this one, but after a tremendous amount of very careful deliberation. And I don't begrudge people who.
I will tell you, I think it's going to be a 6-3 split. I think Roberts and Thomas are going to be the two to pull it down for the corporate structure. I think Justice Thomas is just right of Attila the Hun. I don't like him. He's a prick. He's a cocky bastard too. And Roberts doesn't have balls the size of peanuts.
Well, Thomas is probably the most likely to agree with your position.
Really? You think so?
On this particular issue.
Really?
Yes.
And I've always found him to be kind of like king of the liberals. And I don't consider myself in any way, shape, or form a liberal in any way. I'm as staunchly conservative as you can get.
On this one, I think that if I had to place a bet, I'd guess that Thomas.
So it's going to be a 5-4 split then.
So, but anyway, it's going to be hard fought, and it's going to have a lot of interesting things to say about a lot of people's rights, and going to set the future of what free speech looks like online. And, there is a cost as well to your position when you start inviting the government to decide what is going to be hosted and what's not going to be hosted. There are some tensions there with usual conservative thought, that is interesting, and, the dust is going to settle where it settles.
Well, fortunately, we picked up a platform called Odyssey.com that allows all speech in all forms. It is adamantly free speech. It's a video platform quickly taking over YouTube.
Yes.
Thankfully. And we are now part of that platform. Pastor Steve, questions for Joe Cohn?
I mean, even like things on Facebook, for instance. I just want to.
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Hi. Hey, go ahead, Pastor.
Can you hear me now?
A little.
Hear me now?
A little.
A little.
Well, he is
He's actually sitting right next to me, Joe. So.
Okay, great.
There he is.
Hey, Joe.
Hi.
So like certain things, like I was saying, I go live every week on Facebook for the church services. And there's even been times where my video has been, went up perfectly. But if they don't like anything I'm even speaking about, they will literally take the sound out of the video. It's happened to me already. Yes. And I've had my other parishioners that were watching online saying, hey, what's going on? And they'll literally take out what they don't want other people to hear. It can even be about Islam. Like I preached against Muhammad before. I'll tell you that. And I've given the whole history on Islam. I don't show partiality to anybody. I mean, obviously Christ, because I know he's the Lord and Savior. I believe that. But
they'll let him say Christ. Let's talk about Christ.
Yeah.
They'll let him say Christ, Joe, but they bleep out the word Jesus.
Yes.
He's a priest doing a Bible study at a church, okay? He can't say Jesus. I mean, come on.
And I think that there are legitimate reasons why people are frustrated with those, decisions, and don't think they're particularly rational. Right. And I understand what you're arguing, but it still comes to the crux of the question of, is your remedy to find a social media platform like Odyssey that isn't going to censor you, or is your remedy to make the platform you were on allow your allow your speech to proceed how you wanted it to. And that really is going to come down to that question of, are they platforms or are they publishers? And that's a very technical legal question that, is at the heart of it.
Here's another thing. So they are also selecting my audience of who can hear me and who can't. So I even noticed, like, I have about 4,000 people. I've had Facebook since it first came out, 2007, I guess, 2000, so over years in ministry, family, different friends, Facebook acquaintances, yada, yada, yada. There are people that will look for my sermons, for instance, and they're not even notified when I go live where they were before. Facebook's only selecting about 30 to 40 people that are allowed to actually hear me. And there are people looking for me that want to hear the message preached. It's like they are doing everything they can to silence you. I mean, I know I'm going through
They're doing that though with not just priests, rabbis, ministers. They're doing it with the Baptists. There's a black preacher on.
Yeah.
They bleep this guy. I mean, they come out and bleep this guy.
Look, in a culture of free speech, the private platforms wouldn't be doing these things in the ways that you're describing. So I think that there's plenty of room to be calling for them to change their ways and to treat people and speech with more respect. But there's also the other side of that coin when you go back to the parade analysis, which there's no doubt in my mind that organizers of parades are speaking, and the person who wanted to jack their float along were also trying to speak. So you're talking about a contest between two different speakers' rights, not one who wants to believe in free speech and one who doesn't believe in free speech. So you're in that kind of scenario where the court is going to have to decide what's the bigger principle at play and what makes more sense here. And it's going to be, a tough one. And, fire, has fallen on the line that, it's the cure is worse than the disease here. I understand why others, disagree on that, but that's, you're putting a point and putting a finger on the best arguments for the other point of view. I understand it. But you're really dealing with that tension of two different types of free speech rights.
Let me take a break right now. We'll come back and finish this up. Be right back.
What's Buzz Podcast wants to welcome Radioactive FM 88.6 in Wellington, New Zealand, Radio Perth, Australia, and RTL Radio 102.5 in Milan, Italy. Welcome aboard, and welcome to the Buzz.
All right. We are back with Joe Cohn, Policy and Legislative Director of FIRE, Alan Taylor, academist and scholar, Amelia the Pitbull Chapman, my social guru, and Pastor Stephen Kwiatkowski of the Union Church in the Wilderness. Great little country church. It's an Anglican church, Clementon, New Jersey. Pastor Steve is at your beck and call if you need him for prayer, for whatever. Give him a call, 856-896-5332. Pastor Steve Kwiatkowski, 856-896-5332 at Union Church.
So many New Jerseyans in one space broadcasting out to the universe. I love it.
And a Floridian, huh? That's under hurricane warning.
I gotta bring it back, Joe. This is 1 hour can't even encapsulate with just such a good one. You know how I am, Joe. I mean, I get passionate. Sometimes I get boisterous and loud. But I love the fact that a guy like you can come on here. And God bless Joe.
Yes,
he's always
thank you.
So calm, and he's the voice of reason. Bless his heart, and he needs to be with a crew like this because we're just fucking crazy. Okay, we really are. Joe, can I get you to come back?
Of course. You let me know when, and we'll try to make it work.
I'll make sure Sophia gets your ass here early too.
Yep.
For Joe Cohn, for Alan Taylor, for Amelia the Pitbull Chapman, and Pastor Steve Kwiatkowski, I am Angelo, the Mad Dog DeCipio. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Join us Friday night when we welcome television and film actor Johnny Whitaker. You remember him from Family Affair. He'll be here Friday at 7 on a special weekend edition. Be good, everybody. Take care. God bless, and be safe.
Thank you.